All right, Cam McNutt is in the Department of Environmental Quality, Division of Water Resources. He's also on the Statewide Mapping Advisory Committee and the Metadata Committee and the chair of the Stream Mapping Advisory Committee. So he's a valuable member of our GS community here. And he is a parcel data consumer.
Can you hear me? Get closer. If you saw me yesterday, my voice isn't any better, so sorry about that. I feel better. If that makes any difference. While I'm getting situated here. I was involved with this project kind of from day one when it kind of started forming over in what was then the Department of Environment and Natural Resources through the EPA grant. I managed to stay away from any heavy lifting, which was really good, but I now am a pretty happy end user. How's that? Is that any better? I'll just hold it. Okay. So one of my, the first uses when it came out, we had all these grand plans. We were going to estimate how much land value would cost within 30 feet of streams, with 50 feet of streams to do restoration work. We were going to figure out where the public lands were that we could use, and we're still going to do all this, but the first use that we had out of this data was in kind of an emergency situation. You may have heard of coal ash ponds. They've kind of been in the news a little bit. Well, somehow I was involved in trying to locate where 700 to 1,000 wells were within 1 mile of these coal ash ponds, and of course it needed to be done in like 10 minutes. And a lot of these wells are old. You couldn't see them from above ground, the wellhead, so they needed to have some idea about how many wells needed to be sampled as part of this program because, you know, the coal ash ponds have been there for a very long time, but the perception of the contamination started in 2014 when the Dan River spill took place. So luckily, what we had were property centroids, and if you go to these applications, you will see the wells are located right in the middle of all these properties. Exactly. We did not have locational information. So, and we have a little disclaimer over here on this site that if you want to properly locate your well, please send us the latitude and longitude of where it is. This thing has been out for about 1.5 years now. We haven't had a single person correct it. So obviously the centroids work really well. The other thing you want to do, if you want to get to know all of the lawyers, federal, state, local, Duke Power lawyers, any other lawyers, just put your name right there. I've talked to so many lawyers over the last 1.5 years, and it's about GIS stuff. Like, what does that mean? What's that dot for? What are those lines? Why are they pink or magenta or whatever it is? And the most important thing is on Friday afternoons at 4:30 when that service goes down, the lawyers don't call Brett, they call me, and then I call Brett. Although I've avoided it in some cases. I just tell them that they need to reload their cache or use a different browser or something, and then come talk to me Monday. So that was my first use of that, and of course that was just like we planned. We first put together the business cases, you know, in case there's a coal ash spill, we'll be able to have the centroids to locate wells. Okay, the second way that we use this also had to do with coal ash, and this has to do with supplying water to all of those people that had wells that were potentially contaminated. And I think there's, I don't know, over $17 billion of potential value property that's involved with this thing. But we had to draw these, I think they're red, these red arcs that are 1/2 mile from those coal ash ponds, and anyone whose property touched that could potentially be supplied water from Duke. Either they'll run a line from existing water supplies, municipal water supplies, or in some cases they'll be given filtration systems, which I recently found out are going to be about $14,000 to $15,000 a house, plus they have to maintain them for some time going forward. And if you look at the property value, which is on there, you will easily see that some of these water supplies are going to be worth more than the property that they're on in some of these rural areas. So it's pretty interesting to me to look at this stuff, and it's not really anything that I do as part of my regular business. I was just standing in the hallway at the wrong time, and they said, that guy knows how to use GIS. The other thing that we did as part of this project was we used the Parno, or what's the field that has the parcel number in it for all of them? The Alt Parno or the Parno? Parno is what we use to communicate with Duke Power to make sure that they had included all the properties that should be included and that we had accounted for those as well. So that turned out to be a pretty good identifier versus using what were homeowner supplied information, which went from rural route addresses to owner addresses, which weren't even in state in a lot of cases. So that turned out to be a pretty good way to coordinate the data between the Duke folks and ourselves. Now back to what our original intent was to have this parcel data was we are required to put together some sort of water quality restoration plan for all the waters in the state that are not meeting water quality standards. And that's about 1,100 water bodies. Unless you count Mercury, then it's all of them. So we have to somehow, in a very cost-effective way, put these plans together, and going out into the field and walking creeks is increasingly expensive, especially when we don't have a lot of field staff. So what we're developing are some tools and really some workflows, GIS-based, to develop these water restoration plans, mostly on the desktop, and we're using the parcel data set a lot here. We're using it to identify opportunities, and opportunities in a water quality sense are, is there land that is not built on? So an opportunity is parcels that aren't built on, so we can easily find that. There's a field that tells you whether there's a structure on it or not. We also want to look at the size of the properties. The larger the property, the more opportunity you have to do restoration work. The other thing that we can really quickly do is identify public lands, and public lands at both the local government level, like schools, and also easements that cities own, DOT areas. Those are all potential opportunities for us to do work as well. The big thing that we had not been able to do before was estimate the cost of projects. And the biggest part of cost for any of these restoration projects is the land value. The construction work, if you have to do work, is expensive as too, but when you're working in like downtown Raleigh, the most expensive part of the project is going to be the land value. And so we can easily estimate those costs now if we need to take, if we're going to do work on 30 feet from the stream on one side and 70 feet on the other side, we can pretty easily estimate how much that's going to cost just in the land value. We can calculate the return on investment on this. We're developing some tools right now to kind of monetize water quality restoration, and part of that is looking at how much it costs to do the project versus how much it returns in water quality value over time. So the more expensive the land, the longer the return value is on that. So we can do that pretty easily now. And that helps decision makers really decide, do we do a project here or do we spend our limited resources somewhere else? We also do source analysis. I'm going to show you a slide and kind of point out some things that you may not realize you can get from looking at a parcel data set. The other thing you get is you get a quick list of stakeholders. All the people that own land in the particular drainage area are the people that are going to be most affected, and maybe the ones that get the most benefit out of some of the restoration work. So you can quickly get together kind of a mailing list to, are we trying to fix the yellow? So this is oh, there it goes. This also for me, I do a lot of GIS work, but I'm kind of colorblind. So there's a lot of times I'm talking about colors and people are like, there's no blue on the screen. But I know the color palette, so I know that I know the red is 3 up and 3 down. So if someone ever changes that, my maps are going to be all screwed up. This is an area that I'm working in right now. Here's the impaired water body. It's a little creek. It's not a very big drainage area. The estimated cost for the land is about $14 billion. That's if we did something with all the land. But some of the things that we can figure out by looking at this, we see our big parcels here that are undeveloped. So there's potential area for us to maybe look at some land purchase to protect the water quality that is there. Also, we could potentially have access for stream restoration. We can also tell that this side of the creek was developed before the new buffer rules were put in. We can tell because the houses and the properties are pushed right up against the creek. And we can tell that these were developed later because they actually have easements along here where they have open space and they've put in stormwater control measures. So we can tell pretty quickly, this is a newer developed area and probably has less water quality impact than the other side of the stream, which was developed earlier. So between using the parcel data and the imagery, we can kind of put together a timeline as to when water quality went bad in an area, and also we can back that out to see what do we need to do, what properties are we going to prioritize to try to fix things on. Because all of this is really voluntary. So we really have to kind of work with the owners and prioritize on the opportunities. And the opportunity is not just is there land, but do we have someone who wants to do the work on the land? A couple of other things we look at. DOT is one of the big stakeholders in all of our restoration projects, and we can very quickly look at their ownership of their linear features there and help them to be prioritize projects in those areas for restoration as well. Like if they're going to replace culverts with bridges or do some other stormwater control measures around the roads, we can very easily identify that using these tools as well. Couple of other things that we can use with this is you can tell by this area right here that this is a very dense property, a very dense amount of property. So the drainage area we're working in is about 1,400 acres, and there's 1,400 homeowners. So we got a very dense property, even though you can see some very large tracts there. So we got a lot of people that we have to work with. And a lot of times if you show management something like this, they'll go, whoa, that's too many people. Find me one that only has 3 property owners, and then we'll work with those guys. So, but what you will find is that people that own small tracts of land are more likely to give you some sort of right-of-way to work on it because they're like, yeah, what's another 10 feet? You know, I don't have any yard anyway. But people that own large tracts of land are like, no, that's going to be condos. You can't have it. So that's kind of how we can kind of judge what we're going to be dealing with. If we're going to be dealing with 5 large landowners or we're going to deal with 500 small landowners, that kind of changes how we put our resources into it as well. And the last thing I'll tell you is the most fun thing you can do with this is you can quickly gather intelligence on your neighbors and talk about it at neighborhood parties. Say, hey, I noticed you bought your house in 1985, and who's this LLC that owns your land? Found out about my neighbor when I was doing it. And that's all I have, if you have any questions.